The grand chamber floated in the darkness of space like a massive crystal sphere. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their designated seats. The chamber was built around a circular platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Light filtered through the transparent walls, casting strange shadows across the gathered beings. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the speaking platform. She was the only human in a room filled with creatures that looked nothing like her. Some had scales, others had fur. Some floated in tanks of liquid, while others towered 3 times her height. She had been speaking for hours, defending her species against accusations she knew were unfair. High Arbiter Velthar looked down at her from the highest seat in the chamber. His insectoid body was covered in a gleaming exoskeleton that reflected the chamber lights. His 4 eyes watched Sarah with an expression she had learned to recognize as contempt. He clicked his mandibles together, a sound that echoed through the chamber. "Ambassador Chen, your words are noted," Velthar said. His voice translated into English by the devices all delegates wore. "But words cannot change facts. Humanity has existed in galactic society for only 200 years. In that short time, your species has colonized 89 star systems. You have expanded faster than any species in recorded history." Sarah kept her voice calm. "We colonize uninhabited systems. We have not taken territory from anyone. We follow all council regulations regarding expansion." A delegate from the Zorathi collective hissed from its seat. The reptilian creature's scales rippled with colors that Sarah's translator identified as anger. "You expand like a plague. Your ships are everywhere. Your merchants compete too aggressively. Your colonists refuse to accept proper guidance from elder species." "We compete fairly," Sarah replied, "and our colonists have the right to govern themselves according to human customs, as long as those customs do not violate council law." "We have broken no laws." "Your species is too violent," another delegate called out. This one was a Mytharian, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline structure. "Your history is written in blood. Your entertainment glorifies war. Your children play games of combat. Every human colony maintains military forces far beyond what is necessary for defense." Sarah felt frustration building in her chest, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. "Many species have violent histories. The Zorathi fought wars for 3,000 years before achieving peace. The Krell Empire was built on conquest. The difference is that humanity learned from our mistakes quickly. We have not initiated conflict with any galactic power." "You have not had time," Velthar said coldly. "The Council has studied your species extensively. Your psychological profiles indicate dangerous tendencies. You are too aggressive, too territorial, too willing to resort to force when diplomacy would be preferable. You are too unpredictable." "Unpredictable because we do not fit your expectations," Sarah shot back. "Because we negotiate differently. Because we value individual freedom over collective harmony. That does not make us dangerous." The High Arbiter stood, his full height impressive even among the gathered aliens. "The Council has made its decision. We are not here to debate further. We are here to deliver our verdict." Sarah's heart began to pound. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. "The Council is proceeding with the vote?" "The vote was taken before this session began," Velthar said. "This hearing was merely a formality, a chance for you to speak before the verdict was announced. The Council is unanimous in its decision." The word unanimous hit Sarah like ice water. Even the species that had seemed sympathetic to humanity had voted against them. She thought about the backroom deals that must have been made, the promises and threats that had secured such complete agreement. "The Galactic Council hereby declares humanity a prohibited species," Velthar announced. His voice carried throughout the chamber and was being broadcast to every world in council space. "This designation is granted only in the most extreme circumstances, when a species poses an existential threat to galactic peace and stability." Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to rage against the injustice, but she was a diplomat, trained to maintain control. "On what basis? We have broken no laws. We have attacked no one. This designation is meant for species that have committed acts of genocide or attempted galactic conquest. The designation is preventative," Velthar explained, as if speaking to a child. "The Council has determined that humanity will inevitably become such a threat if left unchecked. Your expansion must be stopped now before you become powerful enough to challenge Council authority. This is fear, not justice." Sarah said quietly. This is wisdom, Velthar countered. The Council has existed for 50,000 years. We have seen species like yours before. Species that expand too quickly, that refuse to accept their proper place in the galactic order. Such species always bring chaos. The Council's duty is to prevent that chaos before it begins. Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Some would not meet her eyes. Others stared at her with open hostility. Very few looked uncomfortable with what was happening. But none spoke in humanity's defense. What are the terms? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer would be devastating. All human colonies outside the Sol system must be evacuated within 1 galactic standard year, Velthar declared. That is approximately 14 Earth months. All humans must return to Earth. The 89 systems you have colonized will be redistributed among Council species according to their needs and contributions to galactic society. 14 months to evacuate billions of people? Sarah's voice finally showed her shock. That's impossible. The logistics alone. The Council will provide transportation assistance, Velthar said, but his tone suggested this was a minor concern. Any humans remaining outside the Sol system after the deadline will be considered hostile combatants and dealt with accordingly. The threat was clear. Extermination. Sarah felt sick. And Earth itself? Earth will remain human territory. The Sol system will be designated as a quarantine zone. A Council blockade will be established to ensure humanity does not expand again. You will be allowed to develop within your own system, but you will have no contact with the greater galaxy. You are imprisoning an entire species for crimes we have not committed, Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but inside she was calculating how many ships Earth had, how many trained soldiers, how much time they would have to prepare. We are protecting the galaxy, Velthar corrected. This decision is final. There will be no appeals. The Council has spoken with one voice. Sarah took a slow breath. She thought about the instructions she had been given before this session. Instructions that had seemed paranoid at the time. Instructions she now understood had been all too necessary. High Arbiter, members of the Council, she said formally, I have delivered humanity's position. I have argued our case according to all proper procedures. You have rejected our arguments and pronounced your sentence. I have only one more thing to say. Then say it and depart, Velthar commanded. You have 1 year to prepare for evacuation. I suggest you do not waste time with speeches. Sarah looked directly at the High Arbiter. Her next words were carefully chosen. They would be heard by every Council species. They would also be heard by humanity. And humanity would understand the real message beneath the surface. You have declared humanity a threat based on what you fear we might become, Sarah said slowly. You have decided to imprison us, to steal our colonies, to undo 2 centuries of human achievement. You believe this will prevent a war. She paused, letting her words sink in. But High Arbiter, you have made a critical error in your calculations. You have assumed that humanity was unprepared for this possibility. You have assumed that we did not foresee this exact scenario. You have assumed that we have been honest about our true military capabilities. Velthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Are you threatening the Council, Ambassador? Do you claim humanity has hidden military forces? We have monitored your species constantly. We know exactly how many ships you have. 843 military vessels spread across your colonies. A respectable force for a young species, but nothing that could challenge the Council's combined might. Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. You have monitored the ships we allowed you to see. You have counted the forces we wanted you to count. You have, with typical arrogance, assumed that humanity would announce its true strength to potential enemies. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Velthar's face. You are bluffing, attempting to forestall the inevitable with empty threats. Perhaps, Sarah agreed, or perhaps humanity learned a valuable lesson from our first contact with the galaxy 200 years ago. Perhaps we learned that the universe is not friendly. Perhaps we learned that species who seem civilized can be just as brutal as any warlord when their interests are threatened. Perhaps we prepared for this exact moment. The chamber had gone silent. Every delegate was focused on Sarah now. You want to know the truth, High Arbiter? Humanity has been preparing for war since the day we met you. Every colony we established was designed to be self-sufficient and defensible. Every merchant ship we built had hidden weapon systems. Every civilian habitat had secret military facilities. Every asteroid mine doubled as a shipyard. We smiled and traded and followed your rules, and the entire time we were getting ready for the day you showed your true nature." "Impossible," Belthar said, but his voice carried less certainty now. "Our intelligence networks would have detected such activity." "Your intelligence networks see what they expect to see," Sarah replied. "You expected primitive humans to be grateful for acceptance into galactic society. You expected us to be awed by your ancient civilizations and advanced technology. You never considered that we might be learning from you while preparing to defend ourselves against you." She turned to address the entire chamber. "Humanity accepts your verdict. We will evacuate our colonies as ordered. But understand this, you have not prevented a war. You have started one. And you have given humanity the moral justification to fight it with every weapon at our disposal." "You cannot win," Belthar stated. "The Council can assemble fleets that number in the tens of thousands. Even if you have hidden forces, you are one species against 47. "That is what you tell yourself," Sarah said quietly. "That is what lets you sleep, thinking you have made the right decision. But High Arbiter, you have no idea what you have just done. You have united humanity in a way nothing else could. You have given us a common enemy. You have shown us that there is no place for us in your galaxy, except as prisoners or corpses, and you have done all of this while knowing nothing about humanity's true capabilities." She walked toward the exit, then paused, and looked back. "The evacuation begins in 14 months, you said. I wonder, High Arbiter, if the Council will still exist in 14 months. I wonder if you will live long enough to regret this decision." "Remove her," Belthar commanded, his composure finally cracking. Security forces moved forward, but Sarah was already leaving. As she walked through the corridors toward her ship, she activated her secure communications device. The message she sent was brief, just 3 words in a code that every human military commander would recognize. "Protocol Omega, activate." Behind her, the Galactic Council continued its session, already discussing how to divide up human colonies among the member species. They talked about the resources they would gain, the territory they would control. They congratulated themselves on preventing a future threat. Not one of them noticed that human ships throughout the galaxy had suddenly changed course. Not one of them detected the encrypted signals bouncing between human colonies. Not one of them realized that in shipyards hidden in nebulae and asteroid fields, in military bases buried beneath colony surfaces, and in orbital facilities disguised as civilian structures, millions of human personnel were beginning to mobilize. The Council had made their decision. They had outlawed humanity. They had given humans 14 months to evacuate or face extermination. They believed they had been wise and cautious. They believed they had prevented a war. They were wrong. The war had already begun, and the Armadas were already assembling. Admiral Marcus Webb had been expecting the signal for 15 years. He was in his office aboard the carrier Independence when it arrived, reviewing reports that seemed routine but contained hidden information. The 3 words appeared on his private screen: Protocol Omega, activate. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what was about to begin. Then he opened them and began typing commands that would change the course of human history. The Independence was orbiting Earth, one of the visible ships that the Council had counted in their intelligence reports. What the Council did not know was that every ship in the visible fleet was also a command and control center for dozens of hidden vessels. Marcus sent the activation codes, and across human space, ships that had been sleeping in the darkness began to wake up. In the Kepler Nebula, 2,000 light-years from Earth, massive doors opened in the sides of asteroids that the Council's scans had marked as ordinary rocks. Ships emerged, their hulls black as the void around them. They had been built in secret over decades, assembled by crews who lived their entire lives in hidden facilities. The crews had trained for this moment, knowing it might never come but preparing nonetheless. Captain Lisa Morrison commanded one of those ships, a destroyer-class vessel designated Shadow 47. She had been born in the hidden shipyard, the daughter of 2 engineers who had given their lives to the protocol. She had never seen Earth except in videos, but she knew why she was here. She knew what humanity was fighting for. All systems coming online, her tactical officer reported. Reactors at full power, weapons armed, stealth systems engaging. Lisa looked at the view screen, which showed 43 other ships powering up around her, This was just one cluster in one hiding spot. Intelligence reports suggested there were hundreds of such clusters throughout human space. The exact number was classified even from her. Only the senior admirals knew the full scope of the protocol. "Take us to Waypoint Alpha," she ordered. "Silent running. No active sensors until we reach the operational zone." The Shadow 47 moved forward, its engines producing almost no detectable emissions. The stealth technology had been developed by human scientists working from theories that the Council's species had declared impossible. Humans had a talent for making the impossible work. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Keiko Tanaka was coordinating the mobilization of ground forces. The Council thought humans had colonial militias, small forces for local defense. They had no idea about the professional military that had been training in secret for generations. "Sir, all units are reporting in," her aide said. "The underground bases are going active. Transport ships are being loaded. The colonial defense forces are ready to deploy." Keiko studied the holographic display that showed human space. 89 colonies, billions of people, all of them about to become battlegrounds. The Council thought they could evacuate humanity peacefully. They thought humans would simply leave their homes and return to Earth like obedient children being called inside. "Send the operational orders," Keiko commanded. "All colonies are to begin defensive preparations immediately. Civilian populations are to be moved to secure facilities. Military forces are to establish perimeter defenses. No one surrenders. No one retreats. Every colony will become a fortress." The orders went out through channels that the Council did not know existed. Humans had learned early to communicate in ways that alien species could not easily detect or decode. Human languages were complex, full of idioms and cultural references that did not translate well. Military codes had been built on wordplay and historical references that meant nothing to alien intelligence analysts. In a research facility on Mars, Dr. James Rodriguez was overseeing the final tests of weapon systems that had been developed over decades. The weapons were based on principles that the Council's scientists had never explored, because they came from humanity's particular way of thinking about problems. "The pulse cannons are ready," his lead engineer reported. "Performance exceeds specifications. The Council's shields will not be effective against this frequency." "And the kinetic kill vehicles?" James asked. "Deployed and waiting. 3,000 of them scattered throughout the target zones. They look like space debris on any scan. When activated, they will accelerate to 0.98 light speed. The Council's ships won't even see them coming." James nodded. He was a physicist, not a soldier, but he understood what his weapons would do. They would kill. They would destroy ships and the beings inside them. He had struggled with that knowledge for years, but the Council had made their choice. They had declared humanity a threat that must be eliminated. Now they would face the consequences. Admiral Webb assembled his senior commanders for a conference. They appeared as holograms around the table in his office, called in from positions throughout human space. Some commanded fleets, others led special operations groups. All of them had been preparing for this moment. "The Council has given us 14 months to evacuate," Marcus began. "They expect us to spend that time organizing a peaceful retreat. Instead, we are going to spend it preparing our offensive." "What about the colonies?" asked Admiral Chen, who commanded the forces in the outer sectors. "The Council will send forces to begin taking control. Our people will be at risk." "The colonies will resist," Marcus replied. "Not openly at first. They will appear to cooperate while secretly preparing for combat. The Council will believe they are processing evacuations when actually they are mobilizing for war. By the time the Council realizes what is happening, every human colony will be a hardened military target." "And the civilian populations?" This question came from General Tanaka. "We cannot fight effectively while protecting billions of non-combatants." "The civilian populations are part of the defense," Marcus explained. "Every colonist has been trained in basic military procedures. They know how to use weapons. They know how to operate defensive systems. They know how to survive in siege conditions. The Council thinks of them as helpless refugees. They are actually a reserve military force." One of the commanders leaned forward. "Sir, the Council outnumbers us, huh? Even with our hidden fleets, even with our superior technology. They have more ships, more personnel, more resources. How do we win this war?" Marcus smiled grimly. "We win because we understand something the Council does not. They think of war as a limited activity, something conducted according to rules and customs. They fight honorably. They avoid civilian targets. They try to minimize casualties. They wage war the way civilized species are supposed to. He paused, making sure every commander was focused on his next words. We are not going to fight that kind of war. We are going to fight the way humanity has always fought when survival is at stake. We are going to use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and break every rule that the Council thinks is sacred. We are going to show them why human history is written in blood. We are going to teach them what total war means. The commanders nodded. They understood. The Council had made a fundamental error. They had judged humanity by their own standards, assuming humans would fight the way galactic species fought. They had not considered that humans came from a different background, a history where wars were not limited and enemies were not treated with honor. What about Ambassador Chen? Someone asked. Is she safe? Sarah will be fine, Marcus replied. She is returning to Earth on a diplomatic vessel. The Council will not harm her. They still think they are civilized, still think there are rules. We will use that assumption against them. In fact, Sarah was already halfway back to Earth, her ship moving through Council space without interference. The other passengers were all human diplomats, merchants, and travelers who had been in Council territory when the verdict was announced. They sat quietly, many of them angry, some frightened. Sarah moved among them, speaking softly, offering reassurance. What she was really doing was passing information. Each person she spoke to received a brief message, a few words that seemed like comfort but actually contained coded instructions. By the time the ship reached Earth, every passenger would know their role in what was coming. The Council's intelligence services monitored the ship, of course. They listened to Sarah's conversations. They heard her telling people that humanity would survive this, that they would find a way through the crisis. They heard nothing suspicious. They did not understand that the real message was in the order of her words, the specific phrases she chose, the rhythm of her speech. Human communication was layered in ways the Council had never fully appreciated. A human could have 3 different conversations at once, the surface meaning, the subtext, and the hidden message. Alien species who communicated more directly could not easily detect the hidden layers. Back in the Kepler Nebula, Captain Morrison's task force was moving toward their first objective. They would not engage Council forces yet. Instead, they would position themselves to observe and gather intelligence. The Council would start moving forces to take control of human colonies soon. When they did, humanity needed to know exactly what they were facing. Captain, we are receiving telemetry from the reconnaissance drones, her communications officer reported. Council fleet movements detected in sectors 7 through 12. Looks like they are assembling a task force. Size and composition? Approximately 800 ships. Mixed species. Mostly escort and patrol craft with some heavier vessels for intimidation purposes. Lisa studied the data. 800 ships to enforce the evacuation of the nearest human colonies. It seemed like overwhelming force. The Council was being cautious, not wanting to give humanity any chance to resist. They did not know that they were being watched by forces they could not detect. They did not know that human ships were already in position around their fleet, close enough to strike but invisible on every scanner. The stealth technology worked even better than the simulations had predicted. Log their positions, Lisa ordered. Track their movements. Pass all data back to command. We need to know their tactics, their formations, their response times. When the shooting starts, we will need every advantage. The days passed. The Council began moving forces toward human space. On Earth and the colonies, humans watched the approach of the alien fleets and prepared. Underground factories worked around the clock, producing weapons and ammunition. Hidden shipyards completed vessels that had been under construction for years. Military forces drilled and trained, going over plans that had been refined countless times. Admiral Webb reviewed the intelligence reports that flowed in from across human space. The Council was moving exactly as the war planners had predicted. They were confident, assembling large forces but not taking extreme precautions. They expected token resistance at most. They expected humanity to recognize the futility of fighting and accept their fate. They still do not understand, Marcus said to his chief of staff. They think we are like them. They think we will calculate the odds and surrender when we see we cannot win. Will we win, sir? The chief of staff asked quietly. Marcus considered the question honestly. If we fight the war, they expect no. If we match fleet against fleet in traditional battles, we will lose. We are outnumbered too badly. But we are not going to fight that war. We are going to fight asymmetrically. We are going to hit them where they are weak. We are going to make them afraid. We are going to break their unity and turn their member species against each other. And if that is not enough, then we will make the cost of defeating us so high that victory becomes meaningless. We will destroy so much of their infrastructure that the Council collapses even if they win the war. We will make them regret the day they decided humanity was a threat. The preparations continued. Human space was transforming from a collection of peaceful colonies into an armed fortress. Every ship, every station, every settlement was becoming part of the war machine. The civilian economy was converting to military production, with an efficiency that would have shocked the Council if they had known about it. But the Council did not know. Their intelligence agents reported that humans seemed to be organizing evacuation efforts. They saw ships moving between colonies, which they interpreted as transport vessels preparing to move refugees. They did not realize those ships were actually moving military supplies and personnel. The Council saw what they expected to see. They saw a defeated species preparing to accept their fate. They did not see the weapons being distributed, the defenses being erected, the traps being set. In 2 months, the first Council forces would arrive at human colonies to begin supervising the evacuation. They would expect cooperation or perhaps minor protests. What they would find instead was something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of years. Humanity united and ready for total war. Admiral Webb stood in the observation deck of the Independence looking out at Earth below. It was a beautiful planet, blue and white, the homeworld of his species. The Council thought they could lock humanity on this one world forever, thought they could contain human expansion and ambition. They were about to learn their mistake. Humans did not accept cages. Humans did not surrender to superior force. Humans fought, especially when they had nothing left to lose. The Council had tried to prevent a war by declaring humanity a threat. Instead, they had guaranteed a war by giving humanity no choice but to fight. The protocol had been created for this exact scenario. For 200 years, humanity had prepared for the possibility that the galaxy would turn against them. Now the preparation would be tested. Now humanity would show the Council what it meant to threaten the wrong species. Marcus touched the window, feeling the cold of space through the transparent material. You wanted to see how dangerous humans could be, he said quietly to the absent Council. You are about to find out. Throughout human space, in the visible fleets and the hidden forces, millions of personnel waited for the order to strike. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Some of them had been born for this, spending their entire lives in the secret military that the Council never suspected existed. They were ready. The countdown had begun. In a few months, the Council would send their forces to enforce humanity's extinction as a spacefaring species. And humanity would respond with everything they had built, everything they had hidden, everything they had prepared over 2 centuries of pretending to be peaceful members of galactic society. The Council thought they were being wise and cautious. They thought they were preventing a future threat. What they had actually done was provoke the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. The Armadas were assembling, and soon the Council would understand what they had unleashed. The Council's expeditionary fleet arrived at New Brasilia 3 months after the verdict was announced. Commander Zethrak of the Zorathi Collective led the force, 12,000 ships drawn from 15 different Council species. It was an overwhelming display of power, meant to convince the humans that resistance was pointless. Zethrak watched the human colony on his view screen as his fleet approached. New Brasilia was a world in the outer regions of human space, home to 40 million colonists. Intelligence reports indicated it had minimal military defenses, just a few patrol ships and some surface weapons. The evacuation should proceed smoothly. Open a channel to the colonial government, Zethrak ordered. His scales rippled with confidence. This was a simple assignment, hardly worthy of such a large fleet. But the Council was being cautious, not wanting to give humans any excuse to claim they were being treated unfairly. A human appeared on the screen, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore the simple clothes of a colonial administrator, Governor Martha Hayes, according to the intelligence file. This is Commander Zethrak of the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet, he announced formally. I am here to supervise the evacuation of New Brasilia as mandated by Council decree. You have 8 months remaining to complete the evacuation. My forces will provide assistance and ensure order during the process. Governor Hayes nodded slowly. "We received the Council's orders, Commander. We are preparing to comply." "Excellent," Zethrak replied. "I will be sending teams to the surface to coordinate with your administration. Transport ships will begin arriving within the next few days to begin moving your population to Earth." "That will be acceptable," Hayes said. "However, Commander, we have some concerns about the logistics. 40 million people is a large population to move. We would like to discuss the timeline." "Of course. We can schedule meetings to address your concerns. The Council wishes this to proceed peacefully." The conversation continued in a professional manner. Zethrak found himself relaxing. The humans were being reasonable, recognizing that resistance would be futile. Perhaps this assignment would be easier than he had expected. What Zethrak did not know was that Governor Hayes was standing in a command center 50 meters below the surface, surrounded by military officers and tactical displays. The image he saw on his screen was being generated by computers, showing him what he expected to see rather than what was real. As soon as the channel closed, Hayes turned to her military commander. "How long until they are in position?" "They are moving into orbit now," Colonel James Park replied. "Typical Council formation, big ships in the center, escorts around the perimeter. They are not even running full sensor sweeps. They think we are helpless." "Then let us show them the truth," Hayes said coldly. "Activate the defense grid." Across New Brasilia, weapon systems that had been hidden in civilian structures came online. Missile silos disguised as storage facilities opened their doors. Laser batteries built into skyscrapers swiveled toward the sky. Orbital platforms that looked like communication satellites revealed their true nature as weapons platforms. And in the empty space around the planet, where Council sensors showed nothing but vacuum, human ships began to appear. They had been there all along, wrapped in stealth fields that made them invisible. Now they dropped their stealth and powered up their weapons. Captain Lisa Morrison's destroyer was among them. She watched her tactical display as 47 other ships materialized around her, emerging from nowhere as far as the Council fleet was concerned. Her Shadow Task Force was just one of 6 that had been positioned around New Brasilia, waiting for this moment. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer announced. "Weapons locked on assigned targets. Waiting for the signal." On the surface, Governor Hayes gave the order. "Execute Protocol Omega Stage 1. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The defense grid fired first. Hundreds of missiles launched from the surface, streaking toward the Council fleet. They were not standard missiles. Human engineers had designed them specifically to defeat Council point defense systems. They twisted and dodged, their flight paths erratic and unpredictable. The Council ships reacted slowly, surprised by the sudden attack. Their defensive weapons engaged, destroying many of the missiles, but not all. Dozens of warheads got through, slamming into hulls and detonating with devastating effect. Before the Council fleet could fully respond, the human ships opened fire. Laser beams and plasma bolts tore across space at the speed of light, giving the Council no time to evade. The stealth ships had been positioned perfectly, their initial volley catching the Council fleet in a deadly crossfire. Commander Zethrak stared at his displays in shock as the carefully organized formation disintegrated into chaos. Ships were exploding all around him. Warning alarms screamed from every console. His communication channels filled with panicked reports from across the fleet. "Where did they come from?" his tactical officer shouted. "There was nothing on our sensors." "Evasive maneuvers," Zethrak ordered. "All ships return fire. Get us out of their kill zone." But it was too late. The human attack had been planned with precision. Every ship in the Council fleet had been targeted. The humans were not trying to defeat them in a fair fight. They were executing an ambush, using superior technology and careful planning to destroy an enemy that outnumbered them. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, nearly 5,000 Council ships had been destroyed or damaged so badly they could no longer fight. The survivors fled in panic, many of them trailing debris and venting atmosphere. The mighty Council fleet had been cut in half by forces they had not even known existed. Zethrak's flagship limped away from New Brasilia, its engines damaged, its hull scarred by human weapons. He sat in his command chair trying to process what had happened. The intelligence reports had been completely wrong. Humans did not have a few patrol ships. They had an entire hidden fleet with technology superior to anything the Council possessed. "Get me High Arbiter Velthar," he demanded. He needs to know what we are facing. The message took hours to reach the council chambers. When Velthar received it, he watched the battle recordings 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. Human ships appearing from nowhere, human weapons tearing through council shields as if they did not exist, human tactics that showed no mercy, no hesitation. This is impossible, Velthar said to his advisors. Our intelligence indicated they had minimal forces. Where did these ships come from? They have been hiding them, one advisor replied, her voice shaking. For years, perhaps decades. They have been preparing for this war while pretending to be peaceful colonists. Then our intelligence services have failed catastrophically, Velthar stated. We need to know the true extent of human military capabilities. Send reconnaissance forces to observe their other colonies. Do not engage. Just gather information. But when the reconnaissance forces arrived at other human colonies, they found the same situation. Every human world had hidden defenses. Every system had ships waiting in stealth mode. The humans had not just prepared 1 or 2 colonies. They had militarized their entire civilization. The Council's military command began reassessing their strategy. The simple evacuation mission had become something far more complex. Intelligence analysts worked around the clock, trying to determine how many ships humanity actually had. The numbers were alarming. We believe they have at least 15,000 warships, the chief analyst reported to Velthar. Possibly more. Most of them have been hidden in asteroid fields, nebulae, and other locations our sensors cannot penetrate easily. 15,000? Velthar repeated. We counted fewer than 900 in our pre-war assessments. They deceived us, the analyst said simply. They showed us what they wanted us to see. Everything else was hidden, and their technology is more advanced than we believed. Their stealth systems, their weapons, their defensive capabilities all exceed our estimates. Velthar felt something he had not experienced in his long career. Fear. The Council had made their decision based on flawed information. They had believed humanity was weak. That overwhelming force would make resistance pointless. Instead, they had provoked a war with an enemy that had been preparing for exactly this scenario. What about the other member species? Velthar asked. Are they still committed to the campaign? The analyst hesitated. Some are expressing concerns. The losses at New Brasilia were heavy, and many of those ships belonged to smaller council members. They did not expect to face serious resistance. This was another problem. The council fleet was not unified. It was a collection of national forces, each species contributing ships but maintaining their own command structures. Unity was maintained by the assumption that they faced a weak enemy. Heavy casualties would strain that unity. Meanwhile, human forces were not just defending. They were attacking. Admiral Webb had ordered offensive operations to begin as soon as the Council forces entered human space. Strike teams that had been positioned throughout Council territory went active, hitting targets that had been selected years earlier. In the Rigel system, 3 Council military bases were destroyed in coordinated strikes. Human ships appeared without warning, launched their attacks, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The bases had been considered secure, protected by sensor networks and patrol ships. The human attackers bypassed all of it. In Council space near the Draco sector, a major supply convoy was intercepted and destroyed. 200 transport ships carrying weapons and supplies for the Council forces were caught by human raiders. The escorts fought back, but they were overwhelmed. Not a single transport survived. The attacks followed a pattern. Human forces struck at logistics and infrastructure, not at heavily defended military targets. They destroyed supply depots, shipyards, fuel refineries, and communication hubs. Each attack caused more damage to the Council's ability to wage war than destroying an equivalent number of warships would have done. They are not fighting the way we expected, a Council military commander complained in a strategy meeting. They avoid our strong points and attack our weak spots. They do not try to hold territory. They strike and withdraw before we can respond. This is guerrilla warfare, another commander said. The term had to be translated from human languages, as most Council species had no equivalent concept. They are using mobility and surprise to offset our numerical advantage. Then we need to force them into a decisive battle, the first commander argued. We need to find their main fleet and destroy it. But the human fleet did not concentrate in one place. It operated in small task forces, each one independent, each one hitting a different target. The Council could not find the main fleet because there was no main fleet. There were dozens of smaller forces, all of them mobile, all of them dangerous. 3 months into the war, the Council had lost over 10,000 ships. Human losses were estimated at fewer than 2,000. The exchange rate was unsustainable. If the war continued like this, the Council would run out of ships before humanity did. Worse, the political situation was deteriorating. Some Council species were questioning whether the war was worth the cost. They had joined the campaign expecting easy victory. Now they were facing heavy losses with no end in sight. Internal conflicts were emerging as different species blamed each other for the failures. The Krell Imperium, one of the largest contributors to the Council fleet, announced that it was withdrawing forces to defend its own territory. Human raids had struck several Krell colonies, and the Imperium's government decided that protecting their own worlds was more important than enforcing Council decrees. Other species began making similar calculations. The unity that had allowed the Council to declare humanity a prohibited species was cracking under the strain of unexpected resistance and mounting casualties. Velthar watched his carefully constructed alliance falling apart and realized that the Council had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that declaring war and actually winning a war were the same thing. They had believed their own propaganda about being the defenders of galactic peace and stability. What they had actually done was attack a species that was better prepared, better equipped, and more willing to fight than anyone had imagined, and now the cost of that mistake was becoming apparent. On Earth, Admiral Webb received the reports of Council forces withdrawing, of member species questioning their commitment to the war. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first phase of Protocol Omega was proceeding exactly as planned. They thought they could intimidate us into surrender, he said to his staff. They thought a show of force would be enough. They did not understand that humans do not surrender when threatened. We fight, and we fight to win. The Council is still powerful, his chief of staff cautioned. They have more ships, more resources. If they commit fully to the war, they could still overwhelm us. Then we need to make sure they do not commit fully, Marcus replied. We need to keep hitting them, keep raising the cost, keep making them question whether this war is worth it. We need to turn their member species against each other. We need to break the Council before they break us. The strategy was clear. Humanity could not win a war of attrition. But they could win a war of psychology. They could make the Council collapse from internal pressures even if they could not defeat it militarily. The war was far from over, but the opening moves had gone to humanity. The Council had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had found themselves in a fight for survival against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. High Arbiter Velthar sat in his chambers, reviewing casualty reports and diplomatic messages from unhappy member species. He had been so certain that declaring humanity a prohibited species was the right decision. Now he wondered if it had been the greatest mistake in Council history. The humans had been preparing for this war since first contact. They had built hidden fleets, developed advanced weapons, and trained millions of personnel, all while pretending to be peaceful colonists interested only in trade and exploration. The Council had been deceived, and now they were paying the price for their assumption that humans were weak and unprepared. The war was just beginning, but already the outcome was uncertain. The mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled for 50,000 years, had met an enemy it might not be able to defeat. And in human space, the Armadas continued to assemble, preparing for the next phase of the war. The fortress world of Carthan had stood unconquered for 12,000 years. It was a massive installation built into an asteroid the size of a small moon, protected by shields that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. The Krell Imperium had constructed it as their primary military base in the galactic core, and it was considered impregnable by every military analyst in Council space. Admiral Marcus Webb studied the tactical displays showing Carthan's defenses. Hundreds of automated weapon platforms surrounded it. Patrol fleets constantly swept the area. The fortress's sensors could detect ships across several light years. No force had ever successfully attacked it. This is madness, General Tanaka said, reviewing the assault plan. We will lose half our fleet trying to take that fortress. Even if we succeed, the cost will be catastrophic. That is what the Council thinks, Marcus replied. That is why we are going to take it. When Carthan falls, the entire galaxy will understand that humanity cannot be stopped. How? Tanaka demanded. Their defenses are too strong. A frontal assault will fail, Marcus smiled. Then we will not make a frontal assault. We will use a tactic that the Council's military doctrine says is impossible. We will infiltrate the fortress before we attack it. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. A team of human special forces would infiltrate Carthan disguised as maintenance workers. The fortress had thousands of civilian contractors doing routine work, and security was focused on military threats, not on checking the backgrounds of technicians. Humans would exploit that weakness. Captain Sarah Kim led the infiltration team. She and 49 other operators arrived at Carthan aboard a contractor ship, carrying identification that appeared legitimate in every database. The Council's bureaucracy was vast and complex, making it possible to insert false records if you knew how the systems worked. Human intelligence had spent years learning those systems. Remember, we are maintenance technicians, Sarah reminded her team as they passed through security. We work on environmental systems. We are bored, underpaid, and just want to finish our shift and go home. Act like it. The security officers barely glanced at them. The Council species had trouble distinguishing one human from another, a weakness that Sarah's team exploited ruthlessly. As long as their documentation matched the database, the guards assumed they were legitimate. Once inside the fortress, the team split up. They had memorized the layout from stolen blueprints. Each operator knew their target. They spent 3 days working normal shifts, actually doing maintenance work to avoid suspicion. No one noticed when they planted small devices in critical locations throughout the fortress. The devices were undetectable by Council sensors because they were not active. They were just chunks of metal and chemical compounds carefully positioned. Only when activated would they become weapons, and they would not be activated until the human fleet arrived. Admiral Webb brought a force of 3,000 ships to Carthan. It seemed like a suicidal attack. The fortress had destroyed larger fleets during past wars, but Marcus was not relying on conventional tactics. All ships maintain formation, he ordered as they approached. Draw their fire. Make them commit their defenses. The Council forces responded exactly as predicted. The orbital weapons platforms opened fire. The patrol fleet moved to intercept. The fortress's shields activated at full strength. Every defense system engaged, creating a zone of destruction that no ship could survive. Marcus watched his fleet take losses and felt each death like a physical blow. But he could not show doubt. This plan required sacrifice. Continue the attack. Target their shield generators. The human ships pushed forward, firing everything they had. It looked like a desperate assault by a force that did not understand the impossibility of their mission. The Council commanders watched with grim satisfaction as human ships exploded under the withering defensive fire. Then Sarah Kim activated the devices her team had planted. The charges they had positioned throughout the fortress detonated simultaneously. They were not powerful explosives. They did not need to be. Each charge was carefully placed to disable a specific system. Shield generators, weapons controllers, sensor arrays, power conduits. The fortress's shields flickered and failed. Its weapons stopped firing. Its sensors went dark. In an instant, the impregnable fortress became a blind, defenseless target. All ships focus fire on the fortress, Marcus ordered. Exploit the gap. The human fleet concentrated their weapons on Carthan. Without its shields, the fortress was vulnerable. Human missiles and energy weapons tore into the installation, ripping apart the structures that had stood for 12 millennia. Secondary explosions rippled through the asteroid as ammunition and fuel stores detonated. The Council patrol fleet tried to defend the fortress, but they were caught out of position. Human ships that had been held in reserve suddenly appeared, having dropped their stealth fields. They tore into the Council force from behind, creating chaos and panic. The Battle of Carthan lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the fortress was a shattered ruin, still burning from internal fires. The Council patrol fleet had been destroyed. Human casualties were significant, but far less than anyone had expected. The fall of Carthan sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The fortress had been a symbol of Council military might. Its destruction demonstrated that humans could strike anywhere, could defeat any defense, could achieve the impossible through unconventional tactics. More importantly, it broke something in the Council's psychological advantage. Member species had contributed forces to the war effort, believing that the Council could not lose. The loss of Carthan made them question that belief. The Matharian Collective was the first to formally withdraw from the war. They announced that they could no longer support a campaign that was causing such devastating losses for unclear benefits. The human colonies, they argued, were not worth the cost of taking them by force. Other species followed. The Aquilian Federation, the Syrian Concordat, and the Danubian League all recalled their forces. They did not formally make peace with humanity, but they stopped fighting. The Council's Grand Alliance was falling apart. High Arbiter Velthar summoned his remaining military commanders. The group that assembled was smaller than it had been 6 months earlier. Many commanders had been killed in action. Others represented species that had withdrawn from the war. We cannot continue like this, Velthar admitted. The humans are destroying us piece by piece. We need a new strategy. We need to negotiate, one commander said bluntly. The war is unwinnable. Humanity has proven they cannot be forced to surrender. We should seek peace while we still have enough strength to negotiate from a position that is not complete weakness. The Council does not surrender, Velthar said automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. The Council has never faced an enemy like humanity, the commander replied. Our doctrines, our strategies, our assumptions about warfare all assumed enemies who think like us. Humans do not. They fight with a brutality and creativity that we cannot match. Every day we continue this war, we grow weaker while they grow stronger. The debate continued for hours. Some commanders wanted to escalate, to commit even more forces and crush humanity through sheer numbers. Others argued that such a strategy would only lead to more losses. The Council was divided, paralyzed by disagreement. While the Council argued, human forces pressed their advantage. They struck at the Council's most prestigious targets, demonstrating that nowhere was safe. The Grand Library on Axiom Prime was damaged in a raid. The Council's primary communications hub was destroyed. Supply lines were cut across dozens of systems. Each attack was carefully chosen for psychological impact. Humans were not just trying to win battles. They were trying to break the Council's will to fight. They were showing that the cost of defeating humanity would be the destruction of everything the Council valued. In a secret facility on Mars, Dr. James Rodriguez unveiled new weapons to Admiral Webb. We have been holding these back, waiting for the right moment, he explained. This is a quantum disruption weapon. It tears apart the molecular bonds in whatever it hits. There is no defense against it because it operates at a level below what shields can block. Marcus studied the weapon specifications. Casualties. Total within the effective radius. Everything organic dies instantly. Everything mechanical stops functioning. It is the most destructive weapon humanity has ever created. Then we will save it, Marcus decided. We will not use it unless we have no choice. But the Council needs to know we have it. Leak the specifications to their intelligence services. Let them understand that we have held back our most terrible weapons. Let them imagine what we will do if they force us to use them. The psychological warfare was as important as the actual battles. Humanity was fighting a war of perception, trying to convince the Council that continuing the conflict would lead only to mutual destruction. The leaked information about superweapons, whether those weapons would actually be used or not, added to that perception. Ambassador Sarah Chen, who had returned to Earth, was conducting her own campaign. She had established contact with sympathetic factions within Council species, politicians and citizens who opposed the war. She provided them with information about human losses and suffering, stories designed to generate sympathy. More importantly, she provided information about Council losses. Many Council species did not know the true cost of the war because their governments were suppressing the information. Sarah made sure casualty figures and battle reports reached opposition groups, who then spread them through their societies. Public opinion in many Council species turned against the war. Protests erupted on several homeworlds. Politicians who had supported the campaign found themselves facing angry constituents demanding answers. The war that had seemed justified when it began now looked like a catastrophic mistake. The Zorathi Collective, whose commander had led the failed assault on New Brasilia, voted to withdraw from the Council entirely. They declared the human situation an internal Council matter that did not concern them. Their withdrawal removed 5,000 ships from Council forces. The cascade continued. One by one, Council species found reasons to stop fighting. Some withdrew officially. Others simply ordered their forces to avoid combat with humans. The Grand Alliance that had declared humanity a prohibited species was dissolving. Velthar watched his power crumble and understood that the war was lost. Not lost militarily, though humanity was winning most battles. Lost politically as the coalition he had built fell apart, under the strain of unexpected resistance and mounting costs. He composed a message to the Council's remaining members. We must acknowledge reality. Humanity cannot be defeated through military force. Our attempt to enforce their evacuation has failed. We have two choices: continue fighting until both sides are exhausted and ruined, or seek peace while we still have something to negotiate with. The debate that followed was bitter. Some council members refused to accept that they had been defeated by a single species. They demanded escalation, total commitment to destroying humanity regardless of cost. But they were a minority. Most members recognized that the war was over, even if the fighting had not stopped yet. A vote was called. This time the council voted to authorize peace negotiations with humanity. The vote was not unanimous. 7 species voted against, insisting that humanity remained a threat that must be eliminated. But the majority had decided that peace was preferable to continued destruction. The message was transmitted to Earth. The Galactic Council requests negotiations to end hostilities and establish terms for peaceful coexistence between humanity and Council species. Admiral Webb received the message and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. We won, he said quietly. We actually won. The war is not over, General Tanaka cautioned. 7 species voted to continue fighting. There will still be battles. But the Council has lost, Marcus replied. Their unity is shattered. Their military is broken. Their member species are questioning their leadership. Even if some continue fighting, the war as a whole is over. Now we negotiate from a position of strength. Ambassador Chen was recalled from her unofficial diplomatic efforts to lead the peace negotiations. She knew that the peace would be as important as the war. Humanity needed to establish itself not as a conquered species, but as an equal power in galactic affairs. The negotiations would be difficult. The Council would try to save face to maintain some illusion of authority. Humanity would need to be firm but not vindictive. The goal was not to humiliate the Council, but to ensure that humanity would never again face the threat of extinction at alien hands. But that was for later. For now, humanity celebrated. They had been declared a prohibited species, marked for extinction or imprisonment. They had faced an alliance of 47 alien civilizations with thousands of years of history and technology. And they had won. The victory came at a cost. Thousands of human ships had been destroyed. Tens of thousands of personnel had died. Several colonies had been damaged in the fighting. But humanity had survived. More than survived, they had proven themselves to be the equal of any species in the galaxy. High Arbiter Velthar sat in his chambers, contemplating his failure. He had been so certain that declaring humanity prohibited was the right decision. He had believed that the Council could easily enforce its will. He had assumed that humans were a minor threat that could be eliminated before they became dangerous. Every assumption had been wrong. Humans had been more prepared, more capable, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. They had turned the Council's strength against itself, using the Alliance's complexity and diversity to create divisions and doubt. They had fought with a ferocity and creativity that Council forces could not match. And now the Council that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was broken, its authority questioned, its military defeated, its unity shattered, all because they had tried to eliminate a species they did not understand. Velthar composed his resignation. He would step down as High Arbiter, taking responsibility for the disaster. Perhaps his successor could salvage something from the wreckage. Perhaps the Council could be rebuilt into something that learned from this catastrophic mistake. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The species that had been declared a threat had proven themselves to be exactly that. Not because they sought conquest or empire, but because they refused to accept extinction. Because when threatened, they fought back with everything they had. The Council had outlawed humans. The Armadas had assembled. And humanity had shown the galaxy what happened when you tried to cage a predator. The war was not quite over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity would not only survive, they would emerge from the conflict as one of the dominant powers in galactic civilization. The negotiations would determine the exact terms. But the fundamental truth was already established. Humanity was here to stay. and anyone who tried to remove them would face the same fate as the Council. The conference room aboard the human dreadnought Resilience was designed to make a statement. The walls displayed images of human colonies, showing cities rebuilt after Council attacks and memorials to those who had died in the war. The table was made from wood grown on New Brasilia, a reminder of the battle where humanity had first revealed its true strength. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat at the head of the table, flanked by Admiral Webb and General Tanaka. Across from them sat what remained of the Council's leadership. High Arbiter Velthar's successor, a crystalline being named Siraeth, and representatives from the 23 species that had stayed with the Council through the end of the war. "Let us be clear about the situation," Sarah began. Her voice was calm but firm. 6 months ago, the Council declared humanity a prohibited species and demanded we abandon our colonies. Instead, we fought back. We defeated your fleets. We destroyed your fortresses. We forced your alliance to collapse. 24 species have withdrawn from the Council. Your military capabilities are a fraction of what they were. You have come here not as victors dictating terms, but as defeated powers seeking mercy. Siraeth's crystalline form shifted, colors moving beneath her surface in patterns that indicated discomfort. The Council acknowledges that the situation has changed. We are prepared to discuss a peaceful resolution. Then let me tell you what that resolution looks like, Sarah continued. She activated a holographic display showing her terms. First, the Galactic Council as it currently exists will be dissolved. The organization that declared humanity prohibited, that attempted genocide, cannot continue to govern galactic affairs. Impossible, one of the Council delegates objected. The Council has maintained peace for 50,000 years. To dissolve it would create chaos. The Council created chaos when it tried to eliminate humanity. Admiral Webb interjected. You started a war that killed millions and destroyed the unity you claim to value. The old Council is finished. The only question is what replaces it. Sarah brought up the next point. Second, all human colonies will be recognized as legitimate sovereign territory. The systems we have colonized belong to humanity. No Council species will have any claim on them. Additionally, humanity will receive compensation for the damage done during the war. We calculate the value at approximately 15 trillion galactic credits. 15 trillion, Siraeth repeated, shocked. That amount would bankrupt multiple Council species. That is the cost of your decision to wage war on us, Sarah replied without sympathy. You wanted to take our colonies and imprison us on Earth. You failed, but you caused tremendous damage in the attempt. Someone must pay for rebuilding what you destroyed. The negotiations continued for hours. Each point was contested, but humanity held all the advantages. The Council had lost the war. They had no choice but to accept terms that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. On the third day of negotiations, Sarah presented the most controversial demand. Humanity will have direct oversight authority in the formation of any new galactic governance structure. We will not accept being subject to the decisions of an organization we have no voice in. Never again will humanity be declared a threat by powers that do not understand us. You want to rule the galaxy, one delegate accused. We want to ensure we are never threatened with extinction again, Sarah corrected. If that means having significant influence over galactic governance, then yes, we will insist on that. You forced this situation by attacking us. Now you live with the consequences. The Council delegates requested a recess to discuss the terms privately. Sarah knew what they were doing, trying to find some way to reject the demands without restarting the war. But they would find no such option. Humanity had won decisively, and the terms reflected that reality. When negotiations resumed, Siraeth spoke for the Council. We cannot accept these terms in their entirety. They would reduce the Council to irrelevance and place humanity in a position of dominance over species with thousands of years more experience in galactic affairs. Then make a counteroffer, Sarah invited. But understand that any offer must include recognition of human sovereignty over our colonies, significant compensation for war damages, and meaningful human participation in whatever governance structure emerges. Those points are non-negotiable. The negotiations dragged on for 2 weeks. Each side made concessions on smaller points while holding firm on the major issues. Gradually, a treaty began to take shape. The Council agreed to dissolve itself and reform as the Galactic Assembly, a new organization with different rules. All species would have equal voting rights regardless of age or size. Decisions would require broader consensus, preventing any small group from imposing their will on others. Humanity would be recognized as a senior member of the Assembly, with special veto authority on any decisions that could affect their survival or expansion. It was not quite the oversight Sarah had demanded, but it ensured that humanity could never again be declared prohibited without their consent. The compensation was reduced to 8 trillion credits, to be paid over 20 years. It was less than Sarah had demanded, but still a massive sum that would fund reconstruction across human space. Most importantly, the treaty included a clause that prohibited any species from being designated as prohibited, without clear evidence of aggressive action. The Council's preemptive strike doctrine was abolished. No species could be attacked simply because others feared what they might become. While the negotiations proceeded, fighting continued in some sectors. 7 Council species had voted against peace and were still attacking human colonies. But without the support of the full Council, their efforts were ineffective. Human forces defeated them in battle after battle. The Krell Imperium, largest of the holdout species, suffered a devastating loss when human forces destroyed their home fleet in a surprise attack. The raid was bold to the point of recklessness, striking directly at the Krell homeworld. But it succeeded, breaking the Imperium's ability to project power. After that defeat, even the holdout species began seeking separate peace agreements. They recognized that they could not defeat humanity alone when the entire Council had failed to do so together. 3 months into the negotiations, Sarah finally achieved the breakthrough she needed. The Council agreed to all major human demands in exchange for humanity, accepting limits on their future expansion. Humans could continue colonizing uninhabited systems, but would need Assembly approval before settling any system that another species had claimed. It was a reasonable compromise. Humanity had never wanted to conquer alien territory, only to be free to grow and develop without interference. The treaty gave them that freedom while providing a framework for peaceful coexistence. The signing ceremony was held aboard the Resilience, broadcast to every world in human and council space. Sireth and Sarah stood together, each signing the treaty documents that would reshape galactic civilization. "This treaty represents a new beginning," Sireth said in her formal statement. "The old ways where ancient species dictated terms to younger ones have passed. The Galactic Assembly will be built on principles of equality and mutual respect. All species, whether they have existed for 50,000 years or 200, will have a voice in shaping our collective future." Sarah's statement was more direct. 6 months ago, the Council tried to eliminate humanity. They declared us too dangerous to exist, too aggressive to be trusted. They were right about one thing: we are dangerous, but only to those who threaten us. Humanity does not seek to dominate the galaxy. We seek only to be free to grow, to explore, to build our civilization according to our own values. This treaty ensures that freedom, and it ensures that no species will ever again face the choice between extinction and total war. The treaty was ratified by the human government on Earth within days. The remaining Council species took longer, their governments debating whether to accept terms that reduced their influence. But eventually all 23 signed. They had no real alternative. The treaty formally took effect on the 1-year anniversary of the Council's original verdict. Humanity had been given 14 months to evacuate their colonies or face extermination. Instead, they had fought a war, defeated the Council, and emerged as one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Admiral Marcus Webb retired the day after the treaty was signed. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. When it did come, he had led humanity to victory, but the cost had been high and he was tired. At his retirement ceremony, he spoke to the assembled officers who had served under him. "We won this war because we were prepared. For 200 years, humanity planned for the worst while hoping for the best. When the worst came, we were ready. But I hope you never have to fight another war like this. I hope the galaxy has learned that humanity cannot be pushed around, cannot be threatened, cannot be eliminated. I hope we can now focus on building rather than destroying." General Tanaka succeeded him as commander of human military forces. Her first order was to begin standing down the hidden fleets that had been activated for the war. Many of the secret bases would remain operational, insurance against future threats, But the massive mobilization that had caught the Council by surprise would be reduced to peacetime levels. Dr. Rodriguez continued his research, but with a different focus. Instead of developing weapons, he began working on technologies for peaceful exploration and development. The quantum disruption weapon he had shown Webb was dismantled, its components locked away in secure storage. It would remain there unless humanity faced another existential threat. Sarah Chen was appointed humanity's first ambassador to the new Galactic Assembly. She would represent human interests as the assembly took shape, ensuring that the new organization did not repeat the mistakes of the old council. On Earth, people celebrated the end of the war and the survival of their species. Parades filled the streets of major cities. Memorials were built to honor those who had died. Politicians gave speeches about humanity's triumph and the bright future ahead. But some, like Admiral Webb, understood the deeper truth. Humanity had not won because they were superior or destined for greatness. They had won because they prepared for the worst, because they refused to surrender, and because they fought with everything they had when survival was at stake. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. Humans could be peaceful and cooperative when treated fairly, but when threatened with extinction, they became the most dangerous enemy imaginable. They would use any tactic, accept any sacrifice, and fight with a desperation that more civilized species could not match. The new Galactic Assembly held its first session in neutral space, on a station built specifically for that purpose. Representatives from over 40 species attended, including some that had withdrawn from the Council during the war. They came to build something new, a governance structure that would not repeat the mistakes that had led to the human war. Sarah spoke at the opening session. "We gather here in the shadow of a conflict that should never have happened. The old council made a terrible mistake when they declared humanity prohibited. But that mistake taught us all important lessons. It taught us that fear is a poor basis for policy. It taught us that preemptive action against potential threats creates the very conflicts we hope to avoid. It taught us that no species, no matter how powerful, can impose its will on others without consequences." She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "Humanity came to the galaxy hoping to find friends and allies. We found fear and hostility instead. We were forced to fight for our survival. We won that fight, but the cost was terrible for everyone involved. Let us build an assembly that ensures no species ever faces that choice again. Let us create a system where disputes are resolved through dialogue, where differences are respected, where all species can grow and flourish without fear." The assembly adopted a charter based on principles of equality and non-aggression. It was not perfect, but it was better than what had come before. The old council had been dominated by a few powerful species who imposed their will on others. The new assembly gave every species a voice and required broad consensus for major decisions. Humanity became one of the senior powers in this new order, but not through conquest or intimidation. They had earned their position by defending themselves successfully, and then showing restraint in victory. They could have imposed harsh terms on the defeated council species. Instead, they had sought a peace that allowed everyone to move forward. Years passed. The damage from the war was gradually repaired. Human colonies grew and prospered. New colonies were established in systems that the assembly approved. Trade with alien species resumed and expanded. The scars left by the conflict began to heal. Admiral Webb, in his retirement, sometimes wondered what would have happened if the Council had approached humanity differently, if they had sought cooperation instead of control, if they had treated humans as equals instead of threats. Perhaps the war could have been avoided entirely. But he also knew that humanity had needed that war in a strange way. It had forced them to reveal their true capabilities. It had united them in a way nothing else could have. It had proven to the galaxy and to themselves that humans belonged among the stars, that they could not be pushed aside or eliminated. The hidden fleets remained, ready to be activated if needed. The secret bases continued their work, developing new technologies and training new generations of personnel. Protocol Omega was still operational, updated and refined based on lessons learned from the war, because humanity had learned their own lesson from the conflict. The galaxy was not always friendly. Threats could emerge unexpectedly, and the only way to ensure survival was to remain prepared, to maintain strength, to never become complacent. High Arbiter Siriath, who had negotiated the peace on behalf of the defeated council, sometimes met with Sarah Chen to discuss assembly business. They had become something like friends, united by their shared experience of the negotiations that had reshaped galactic civilization. "Do you think it will last?" Siraeth asked one day, referring to the peace. "Or will humanity and the assembly eventually come into conflict again?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "That depends on the assembly. If it respects human sovereignty and treats us fairly, the peace will last. We have no desire for conquest or domination. We want only to be free to grow and develop according to our own vision. But if the assembly tries to limit us, if it treats us as a threat that must be controlled, then yes, there will be conflict." "A warning?" Siraeth asked. "A statement of fact," Sarah replied. "Humanity has shown what we are capable of when threatened. We prefer peace, but we are very good at war. The choice of which we engage in depends largely on how others treat us." Siraeth's colors shifted in a pattern Sarah had learned to recognize as understanding. "The galaxy will remember that lesson. The human war changed everything. The old order, where ancient species ruled and younger ones obeyed, is finished. The new order must be built on different principles, or it will fail as the Council failed. That was the ultimate legacy of the war. The Galactic Council had outlawed humans, confident in their power and their righteousness. The Armadas had assembled ready to enforce the Council's will. And humanity had shown them that power alone was not enough, that righteousness without wisdom was dangerous, and that underestimating an opponent was the gravest mistake any civilization could make. On New Brasilia, Governor Martha Hayes stood at the memorial built for those who had died defending the colony. 3,000 names were carved into the black stone wall, colonists and soldiers who had given their lives in the opening battle of the war. She came here often, remembering the faces of people she had known, people she had sent into combat. "Was it worth it?" a young colonist asked her once, standing beside her at the memorial. Martha had thought about that question many times. The cost had been terrible, but the alternative would have been worse. "We had no choice," she finally answered. "The Council gave us the choice between extinction and resistance. We chose to fight. And because we fought, because so many gave their lives, humanity survived. Yes, it was worth it. But I wish it had never been necessary." That sentiment was shared by many across human space. The war had been won, but the victory was bittersweet. The dead could not be brought back. The years spent preparing for conflict could not be reclaimed. The resources consumed by the war effort could have built new colonies, developed new technologies, explored new frontiers. But those sacrifices had purchased something precious: security. Humanity would never again face the threat of being declared prohibited. They had proven themselves too dangerous to threaten, too capable to underestimate. The galaxy had learned to respect human sovereignty, not out of love or admiration, but out of fear of what would happen if they did not. In the assembly chambers, debates continued about the future of galactic civilization. Some species proposed restrictions on military buildups, worried about arms races. Others advocated for mutual defense treaties. Still others focused on economic cooperation and cultural exchange. Sarah participated in these debates, always pushing for policies that protected human interests while promoting stability. She walked a careful line between being aggressive enough to ensure respect and restrained enough to avoid appearing threatening. It was exhausting work, but necessary. One day, a delegate from a species that had fought against humanity approached her privately. The Aquilian representative, a winged being named Kresh, had lost family members in the war. Sarah expected hostility, but instead found curiosity. "I want to understand," Kresh said. "How did your species prepare so thoroughly for a war you supposedly did not expect? The hidden fleets, the secret bases, the advanced technology. You claim to be peaceful colonists, but you were building a war machine the entire time." Sarah considered how to answer. "We did not know war would come, but we knew it was possible. Humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. When we first encountered the galactic community, we saw species far more advanced than us with thousands of years of history. We also saw that they viewed us with suspicion. We decided to protect ourselves while appearing harmless. It was not deception for its own sake. It was survival strategy. So you never trusted us," Kresh observed. "We wanted to trust you," Sarah replied honestly, "but trust must be earned. The Council never gave us reason to trust. They tolerated our presence but never truly accepted us as equals. We saw the way they looked at us, the way they spoke about us when they thought we were not listening. We knew that if we ever became inconvenient, the council would move against us, so we prepared. Kresh was silent for a moment, processing this. And now? Do you trust the assembly? More than we trusted the council, Sarah said. But we will continue to maintain our defenses. We will continue to prepare for threats, because the fundamental lesson humanity learned is that the galaxy is not safe. Peace exists only as long as all sides choose peace. The moment one side decides on war, those who are unprepared will suffer. We will never be unprepared again. This philosophy shaped human policy in the years that followed. Humanity participated actively in the assembly, building relationships with other species and contributing to galactic stability. But they also continued to maintain military capabilities that far exceeded what most species knew about. The hidden fleets were partially revealed, giving the assembly a sense of human military strength. But other capabilities remained secret. Insurance against future threats. Human intelligence services continued to monitor potential dangers. Research into advanced weapons continued, though more slowly than during the war. Some criticized this approach, arguing that humanity was too militaristic, too paranoid. But those critics had not faced what humanity faced. They had not been declared prohibited, had not fought for survival against overwhelming odds. They could afford to believe in permanent peace because they had never truly been threatened with extinction. 20 years after the war ended, a new crisis emerged. A species on the far edge of known space began expanding aggressively, attacking neighbors and ignoring assembly protocols. They were powerful, perhaps as powerful as the old council had been. The assembly debated how to respond. Some species wanted to negotiate to seek peaceful resolution. Others wanted to declare the aggressive species a threat and take preemptive action. The debate echoed the discussions that had led to humanity being declared prohibited, and Sarah recognized the danger immediately. We cannot repeat the council's mistake, she argued in the assembly chambers. Yes, this species is acting aggressively. Yes, they are violating our protocols. But declaring them a threat and attacking preemptively will only create the war we are trying to prevent. We must exhaust all diplomatic options first. And if diplomacy fails, another delegate demanded, if they continue attacking assembly members, then we defend those who are attacked, Sarah replied. We respond to actual aggression, not feared aggression. We use force when necessary, but only when necessary. That is the difference between the new assembly and the old council. Her arguments prevailed. The assembly sent diplomatic missions instead of battle fleets. They offered the aggressive species membership in the assembly, with all the benefits and responsibilities that entailed. They made clear that attacks on assembly members would be met with collective defense, but they also offered a path to peaceful integration. The crisis was eventually resolved without major conflict. The aggressive species accepted assembly membership, moderated their expansion, and began participating in galactic governance. It was not a perfect solution, but it avoided a war that would have devastated multiple civilizations. Admiral Webb, watching from his retirement home on Earth, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The lesson humanity had taught through their war was being applied. The galaxy was learning to resolve conflicts without rushing to violence, to treat potential threats with caution rather than aggression. But he also knew that vigilance remained necessary. The galaxy was vast, containing species and civilizations that the assembly had not yet encountered. New threats would emerge, and when they did, humanity needed to be ready. He thought about Protocol Omega, which remained operational after all these years. It had evolved from a desperate contingency plan into a permanent framework for human survival. The hidden bases, the secret research, the classified capabilities, all of it remained in place, ready to be activated if the galaxy ever again turned against humanity. "Do you think we will ever be able to truly relax?" his wife asked him one evening as they watched the sunset. "To trust that we are safe?" Marcus considered the question. "Maybe someday, when enough time has passed. When generations have grown up in peace and the war becomes ancient history. But not yet. Not in our lifetimes. We remember what happened. We remember what it took to survive. We cannot forget those lessons even if we wanted to." On the human colonies, life continued. Cities grew. Children were born. People fell in love, started businesses, pursued their dreams. The war became history. taught in schools, remembered in memorials, but increasingly distant from daily life. Yet beneath the surface of normal civilian life, the military apparatus remained. Young people volunteered for service, trained in tactics and strategy, learned to operate weapons and ships. The reserves were maintained at high levels. Every colony had defense plans, every system had early warning networks, every settlement had shelters and emergency protocols. Humanity had learned to live with a dual nature. On the surface, they were peaceful citizens of a galactic community, participating in trade and culture and scientific cooperation. Beneath that surface, they were warriors ready to fight at a moment's notice, prepared to defend themselves with overwhelming force if threatened. This duality made some other species uncomfortable. They saw it as evidence that humanity remained dangerous, that the fear which had led to the original prohibition was justified. But humans saw it differently. They saw it as the price of freedom, the cost of ensuring that they would never again face extinction at the hands of those who claimed to act for the greater good. Sarah Chen, now an elder stateswoman of the Assembly, sometimes met with young human diplomats preparing for their own careers. They asked her about the war, about the negotiations, about how to balance strength with diplomacy. Never apologize for our strength, she told them. Never pretend to be weaker than we are in hopes of making others comfortable. The galaxy respects strength. They will negotiate with us, cooperate with us, treat us as equals, but only because they know the cost of doing otherwise. The moment we appear weak, the moment we suggest we cannot or will not defend ourselves, we become vulnerable again. But isn't there a risk of seeming too aggressive? One young diplomat asked. Of making others fear us so much that they unite against us? There is always that risk, Sarah acknowledged. That is why we must be wise in how we use our strength. We do not threaten others. We do not attack without cause. We do not seek to dominate or control, but we make clear that we will defend ourselves and our interests with all necessary force. That clarity prevents misunderstandings. It prevents others from making the same mistake the Council made. The years continued to pass. The generation that had fought the war began to die, their places taken by those who had only heard about it in stories. The Assembly matured into an effective governing body, managing conflicts and promoting cooperation. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in millennia, but the memory of the war remained, encoded in human culture and policy. It was remembered in the names of ships, resilience, defiance, retribution. It was remembered in the holidays, Victory Day, Memorial Day, Liberation Day. It was remembered in the oath every human soldier swore, promising to defend humanity against all threats, internal and external. Admiral Webb died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 97, honored as the man who had prepared humanity for its greatest trial and led them to victory. His funeral was attended by representatives from dozens of species, even some who had fought against humanity. They came to pay respect to a worthy opponent, a leader who had done what was necessary to protect his people. General Tanaka spoke at his funeral. Marcus Webb spent his entire life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. When it came anyway, he fought it brilliantly. He saved humanity not through recklessness or aggression, but through careful planning and strategic thinking. He understood that the best way to win a war is to make your enemy regret starting it. He did that, and because of him, humanity is free. The galaxy continued to turn. New generations were born, knowing only peace. The scars of the war faded. The Assembly grew stronger and more inclusive. Humanity expanded to new systems, explored new frontiers, built new civilizations. But in the hidden bases scattered throughout human space, personnel continued their watch. They monitored the galaxy for threats. They maintained the weapons and ships that most civilians never saw. They trained for scenarios that might never occur. They kept Protocol Omega ready just in case, because humanity had learned an eternal truth through fire and blood. Peace is a choice, not a guarantee. It must be defended by those willing to fight for it, and the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, the willingness to stand ready against threats that may never materialize. The Galactic Council had outlawed humans, believing them to be a threat that must be eliminated. The Armadas had assembled, confident in their power and righteousness, and humanity had shown them the consequences of that decision. Now the galaxy knew. Humanity could be friend or enemy, partner or adversary. The choice was not humanity's to make alone. It was a choice the galaxy made every day. in how they treated humans, in how they respected human sovereignty, in how they honored the hard-won peace. And as long as that choice was made wisely, as long as the lessons of the war were remembered, the peace would endure. Humanity would continue to explore, to grow, to build. They would contribute to galactic civilization while maintaining the capability to defend themselves. They would live in peace but never forget how to wage war. They would trust but always verify. They would hope for the best while preparing for the worst. That was the legacy of the war. That was the price of survival. And that was the promise humanity made to itself and to the galaxy. Never again would they be vulnerable. Never again would they face extinction without fighting back with everything they had. The Council had tried to cage them. They had broken free, and now free among the stars, humanity would ensure that no one ever tried to cage them again. The sky was not blue anymore. It had not been blue for many years. Instead, it hung over the land like a dirty blanket, gray and heavy with poison. Below this sad sky, the last humans of Earth lived in large glass domes. These were the final, safe places where trees could grow and water could fall clean from pipes. Commander James Walker stood at the edge of Dome 7, looking out through the thick glass. Outside, the land was brown and dead. Storms of dust moved across what used to be farmland. He placed his hand on the glass, feeling the barrier between life and death. "Commander, the Council is waiting," said a voice behind him. James turned to face his second-in-command, Tom. The younger man looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Everyone looked tired these days." "Tell them I'm coming," James said, taking one last look at the dead world. "Has there been any change in the signal?" Tom shook his head. "No, sir. The objects are still approaching Earth. They will arrive in 3 days." James nodded and followed Tom through the dome's intersections. Around them, people moved with purpose, carrying food or tools. Children played in small gardens where every plant was precious. This was humanity now, just under 5 million people spread across 12 domes worldwide. The Global Defense Force headquarters sat at the center of Dome 7. It was a plain building of metal and concrete, built for use, not beauty. Inside, the World Council had gathered in the main meeting room. "Commander Walker, thank you for joining us," said President Laura, the head of the council. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much suffering. "We need to decide how to respond to these visitors." James took his seat at the table. On the large screen at the front of the room, images from space telescopes showed the approaching ships. There were 7 of them, massive and strange in design. "They say they come in peace," said Dr. Allen, the head scientist. He played the message that had been repeating for days. A strange voice spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth, we come in peace. We have observed your struggle. We wish to help. Please respond." "It could be a trick," said General Reed, an old military man with a face like stone. "We should prepare our weapons." "What weapons?" asked Dr. Allen with a bitter laugh. "Our defense systems can barely stop a meteor, let alone an advanced alien fleet." James listened to them argue. His mind went back 20 years, to the water. Wars when the last of the clean rivers were fought over. He had lost his wife and daughter in those wars. Since then, trust had become a luxury he could not afford. "Commander Walker, what do you think?" President Laura asked, bringing James back to the present. James looked at the images of the ships again. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it from far away. They have technology far beyond ours, but I don't trust anyone who comes with big promises. "We don't have much choice," said a council member named Maria. "Look at our situation. Earth is dying. The outside air is toxic. Our food production barely keeps everyone alive. If there's even a small chance they can help, we must take it." James knew she was right. The domes were failing. The air filters needed materials they could no longer mine. In 50 years, maybe, less humans would be gone from Earth. "I suggest we respond with caution," James said finally. "We tell them they can approach, but only one ship. The rest must stay in high orbit. and we meet them in the neutral zone outside Dome 7, not inside our home, the council voted. Most agreed with James's plan, though General Reed and his supporters voted against any contact. After the meeting, James went to the communications center. There, specialists prepared the message to the aliens who called themselves the Visitors. "This is humanity speaking," the message began. "We accept your peaceful approach. One ship may land at these coordinates, the rest must remain in orbit. We will meet with your representatives and hear what you offer." As the message was sent into space, James walked through the dome to his small apartment. On the wall hung a photo of his wife and daughter smiling in front of trees and a blue sky. A world now gone. That night, James could not sleep. He stood by his window looking at the stars. Somewhere up there, the visitors were coming closer. Were they truly coming to help? Or was this humanity's final mistake? The next morning, the visitors responded. They agreed to all terms. One ship would land while the others remained in orbit. "They seem eager to prove their good intentions," Tom said as they reviewed the message. "Yes," James replied. "That's what worries me." For the next 2 days, Dome 7 was busy with preparations. A meeting place was built in the neutral zone, a simple structure with air filters so humans could breathe outside the dome. Security teams planned for every possible danger. Scientists prepared questions about the visitors' technology and biology. On the third day, James stood with President Laura and the reception team in the neutral zone building. They wore protective suits, though sensors showed the air inside was clean. "They're entering the atmosphere," said a voice in James's earpiece. Through the building's clear ceiling, they watched as a bright light appeared in the gray sky. It grew, larger until they could see the ship, massive and silver, moving without sound despite its size. It landed a safe distance away, stirring up clouds of dust. "This is it," President Laura whispered. "The first contact between humanity and alien life." James put his hand on his weapon. "Let's hope they truly come in peace." A door opened in the side of the ship. Light spilled out, making it hard to see inside. Then shapes appeared. Walking. Figures coming down a ramp. They looked almost human, but not quite. Taller, with skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. There were 5 of them, walking calmly toward the meeting place. The leader stepped forward as they reached the building. He was dressed in simple clothes that looked like a uniform. When he spoke, his mouth moved strangely with the words. "I am Torin, ambassador of the visitors," he said in that same perfect English from the message. "We come to offer help to the people of Earth in their time of need." President Laura stepped forward. "I am President Laura Chen, representing the World Council of Earth. We welcome you and wish to understand your intentions." Torin smiled, an expression that looked practiced. "Our intentions are simple. We have the technology to heal your world, to make your air clean again, to bring life back to your soil and seas." James watched carefully, looking for signs of deception. But all he saw was a being offering the one thing humanity needed most, hope. "And what do you want in return?" James asked, unable to stop himself. Torin turned to him. "You must be the cautious one. That is wise. We ask only for permission to establish a small community of our own people in a region you no longer use. The southern polar area. We find its conditions suitable for our biology." President Laura and James exchanged looks. It seemed too good to be true. "We will need to discuss this with our full council," President Laura said. "Of course," Torin replied. "We have traveled far and can wait a little longer, but not too long. Your world grows more poisoned each day." As they continued talking, James studied the visitors. They were clearly advanced far beyond human technology. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they could have done so easily. Yet something still bothered him, a feeling he couldn't shake. When the meeting ended, the visitors returned to their ship. They left behind devices that they claimed would analyze Earth's atmosphere and soil. Back in the dome, the council gathered. Again. The debate lasted hours. Most wanted to accept the visitors' help immediately. Others, like General Reed, wanted to refuse any contact. "We know nothing about them," the general argued. "Their technology could just as easily destroy us as save us." In the end, President Laura called for a vote. The result was clear. Earth would accept the visitors' offer of help. As James left the council room, he made a private decision. He would work with these visitors. He would welcome their help. But he would also watch them closely. Because Earth could not afford another mistake, not when these were humanity's final breaths. 1 week after the first meeting, the visitors had set up what they called a demonstration site outside Dome 7. James stood at the edge of a newly built platform, watching as Torin and 3 other visitors worked with strange machines. The devices hummed with energy, sending pulses into the dead soil. "This small area will show you what we can do for your entire planet," Torin explained. His English had become more natural sounding over the past days. "The process takes time, but you will see results soon." Next to James stood Mark Wilson, the military advisor who had replaced General Reed after the old man suffered a heart attack. Mark was younger than James, but just as suspicious. "I don't like it," Mark whispered. "They won't explain how their technology works." "They say we wouldn't understand it," James replied. "They might be right." Beyond the platform, a team of Earth scientists in protective suits took readings. Among them was Dr. Anna Miller, the head biologist. She had been working closely with the visitors, learning what she could. "The air quality is already improving in this test area," she called out, checking her instruments. "Toxin levels are down by 12%. Torin smiled. "By tomorrow it will be 30%. In 1 week, you will be able to breathe here." Without protection, James watched as one of the visitors placed small seed-like objects into the soil. They glowed briefly before sinking into the ground. "What are those?" James asked. "Special organisms," Torin said. "They consume the poisons in your soil and convert them to nutrients. They will spread slowly, cleaning as they go." That evening, James met with President Laura and the council in a private meeting room. Anna was there too, presenting her findings. "Their technology is incredible," she said, showing images on the screen. "The organisms they've planted are like nothing on Earth. They're already breaking down chemicals we thought would take centuries to remove." "Can we trust this process?" President Laura asked. "Could these organisms harm us?" Anna shook her head. "We've run every test we can. They only target specific toxins. They ignore healthy cells completely." Mark spoke up. "But what about their request for Antarctica? Why there specifically?" "They say the cold conditions match their home world," Anna replied, "and it's one of the few areas where humans never built major settlements." James listened carefully. Everything the visitors said made sense. Their actions matched their words. Yet something still felt wrong. "I want to see inside their ship," he said suddenly. President Laura looked surprised. "Commander Walker, that might seem hostile." "Not if we invite them to see inside our dome as well," James replied, a gesture of trust on both sides. The next day, James made the proposal to Torin. The visitor seemed to consider it carefully. "We understand your caution," Torin said finally. "Perhaps not the entire ship, but I can show you our control center and living quarters." 2 days later, James and a small team entered the visitor ship. The interior was strange, curved walls that seemed to glow from within, and air that smelled like nothing on Earth. It was neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just alien. Torin led them through hallways where other visitors nodded respectfully. James noticed they moved with a strange grace, as if gravity affected them differently. "This is our main control area," Torin said, entering a large room filled with what looked like liquid displays. "From here, we monitor the healing process across your planet." One of the screens showed a map of Earth with colored areas spreading slowly from points around the world. Another visitor stood nearby, manipulating symbols in the air. "This is Ren, my security chief," Torin said. Ren was taller than Torin, with features that seemed sharper. When he looked at James, his eyes were intense. "You are the protector of your people," Ren said. His voice was deeper than Torin's. "As I am the protector of mine." James nodded. "It seems we have similar jobs." Different worlds, same concerns, Ren replied. There was something in his tone that James understood, the weight of responsibility. The tour continued through living quarters where visitors rested on strange pod-like beds. They saw eating areas where food that looked like colored crystals was consumed. Everything was efficient, clean, and completely foreign. Later that day, James returned the favor, showing Torin and Ren through Dome 7. The visitors watched, with interest as humans went about their daily lives, growing food in indoor farms, teaching children in small schools, working to maintain the dome's systems. Your people adapt well to difficult conditions, Torin observed. We have no choice, James replied. It's adapt or die. At a small park area where trees grew under artificial light, a girl about 6 years old approached them. Before her guardian could pull her back, she held up a drawing to Torin. Is this me? Torin asked, taking the paper. It showed a tall stick figure with a smile, standing next to smaller figures labeled Us. The girl nodded. Are you really fixing our world so we can go outside? Something crossed Torin's face then, an expression James couldn't read. Yes, little one. That is our hope. That night James couldn't sleep. He stood by his window looking at the visitor ship glowing softly in the distance. Their tour had revealed nothing suspicious. The visitors seemed genuinely committed to helping Earth. A knock at his door broke his thoughts. It was Mark. Sorry to disturb you so late, Commander, Mark said, but I found something strange in the data. He showed James a tablet with energy readings. These spikes happen every night at exactly the same time. The visitors say it's part of their ship's normal operation, but it doesn't match any pattern we've seen. James studied the readings. What do you think it means? I don't know, Mark admitted. But they're sending signals to their other ships in orbit, and those ships are sending signals toward deep space. They said they have a homeworld, James replied. They would naturally communicate with it. Yes, but why hide the pattern? Why not just tell us about regular communications? James had no answer for that. The next morning, green shoots had appeared in the demonstration area. Anna was practically dancing with excitement as she showed James. These plants are absorbing carbon dioxide at 10 times the rate of Earth plants, she explained. And look at this. She held up a device. The soil toxicity is down by 40% already. Around them, other scientists were taking samples and running tests. The air did seem clearer here, the color of the soil richer. By next week, we'll be able to expand the treatment to areas around all 12 domes, Anna continued. In 6 months, we could have breathable air in major regions. In a year, her voice broke. In a year, we could have forests again. James watched as Torin approached them. The visitor looked pleased. Your scientists learn quickly, he said. Soon they will be able to continue much of this work themselves. Will your people stay to see Earth fully healed? James asked. Torin looked at the tiny green shoots pushing through soil that had been dead for decades. Some will stay, others will return home. But we will not abandon you before you can manage on your own. Later that day, a message came from the visitors' ships in orbit. They had begun the process of terraforming the Antarctic region for their colony. Machines were being sent down to prepare living spaces under the ice. The World Council met again to discuss these developments. Most members were overwhelmingly positive. This is more than we could have hoped for, President Laura said. A chance to save our world and make peaceful contact with another civilization. Only Mark seemed concerned. They're moving very quickly with their Antarctic base, and they're bringing down more equipment than seems necessary for a small colony. Would you prefer they move slowly in saving our planet? Asked another council member. James listened to the debate, his mind turning over every interaction with the visitors. He had come to respect Torin, even like him. He had seen nothing to suggest the aliens meant harm. Yet Mark's concerns echoed his own unease. The visitors were helping humanity, yes, but they were also establishing themselves on Earth with remarkable speed. And there were still many questions they avoided answering directly. As the meeting ended, James made a decision. He would continue working with the visitors openly, But he would also begin his own investigation into what they might not be telling humanity. Because even as Earth began to heal, James couldn't shake the feeling that the visitors had brought more than just help to his dying world. They had brought secrets. 3 months had passed since the visitors began their work. Outside Dome 7, the landscape had changed completely. Where once there was only dead brown soil, now green plants grew in thick patches. Small trees, specially designed to grow quickly, reached toward the sky. The air, while not perfect, was clean enough that people could go outside with only simple masks instead of full protection suits. James walked through what they now called the New Forest, breathing deeply. Next to him walked Ren, the visitor, security chief. Over the weeks, the two had developed an unusual friendship. "Your world heals faster than we expected," Ren said, watching a small bird land on a branch. Birds had been kept in special sanctuaries within the domes for generations. Now they were being slowly released into the growing forests. "Nature wants to live," James replied. "It just needed help." They continued walking until they reached a small stream. The water flowed clear over rocks that had been buried under toxic dust for decades. Fish swam in the deeper pools, another species being carefully reintroduced. "In my world," Ren said suddenly, "we also faced destruction. But we had no one to help us." James looked at him with surprise. This was the first time any visitor had spoken about their homeworld in detail. "What happened?" James asked. Ren's expression changed in that strange way the visitors had. "We used our resources until they were gone. The air turned bad. The water became poison." He looked at the small stream. "Just like your Earth." "How did you survive?" "We changed. We made new technology. We found ways to live differently." Renabais looked up at the sky. "And we began to travel to find new places." James absorbed this information. It explained the visitors' advanced environmental technology. They had developed it to save themselves. "Is that why you help us? Because you faced the same problems?" Ren seemed to choose his words carefully. "We help because we can, and because there is value in saving a world rather than finding a new one." Later that day, James joined President Laura and other officials for a tour of the expanded restoration zones. Anna led the group, proudly showing the progress. "We've restored nearly 10,000 square miles around the domes," she explained. "At this rate, we'll have livable conditions across most of North America by next year." The group moved to a testing station where scientists worked alongside visitors. "The most amazing part is how they've taught us to continue the process ourselves," Anna said. "We're learning to make our own restoration seeds now." "And the Antarctic colony?" President Laura asked. "How is that progressing?" One of the visitor scientists answered, "It goes well. Our living spaces are nearly complete beneath the ice. Soon we will bring more of our people down from the ships." James noticed how the visitor avoided details. It was always the same when the Antarctic base was mentioned, general answers without specifics. That evening, James met with Mark in a secure room in the Defense Force headquarters. Mark had been making regular trips to monitor the Antarctic situation. "They've built something massive down there," Mark said, showing James images taken from surveillance drones. "Much bigger than a colony for a few thousand individuals." The images showed huge structures beneath the ice, visible only through thermal imaging. Some sections appeared to be power generators of enormous size. "What do you think it is?" James asked. "I don't know," Mark admitted. "But they're drawing materials from their ships in orbit faster than seems necessary, and they've placed devices at regular intervals around the entire continent." James studied the images. "Have you shown these to President Laura?" "Not yet. I wanted your opinion first." James thought about Ren's words earlier that day, about how the visitors had faced destruction on their own world. "Continue monitoring," he decided, "but don't raise alarms yet. They've kept every promise about healing our planet. We need to be certain before we accuse them of anything." The next morning, James received an unexpected invitation. Torin asked him to join a small team traveling to Dome 3 in what used to be Europe. They would fly in one of the visitor ships to inspect the restoration progress there. The ship moved with incredible speed and silence. Through the windows, James watched the Earth pass below. Large green patches were visible now, spreading outward, from each dome like healing wounds. Beautiful, isn't it? Torrin said, joining him at the window. Life returning. It's more than we dared hope for, James admitted. Torrin was quiet for a moment. Commander, there is something I wish to discuss with you. Something important. James felt his body tense. Was this finally the truth behind the visitor's arrival? I have noticed your advisor, Mark, has been watching our Antarctic development closely, Torrin continued. I understand your caution, but I want to assure you, what we build there is not a weapon or threat. Then what is it? James asked directly. Torrin seemed to struggle with his answer. A safeguard for both our peoples. Before James could ask more questions, the ship began its descent toward Dome 3. The conversation was cut short as they prepared to land. Dome 3 had once been built near the city of Paris. Now the dome gleamed in the sunlight, surrounded by growing forests and fields. As in North America, the restoration here was progressing rapidly. The local leaders welcomed them warmly. People smiled and pointed at the visitors with hope and gratitude. Children presented gifts of artwork showing green earth and the silver, ships that had brought salvation. One old man approached James with tears in his eyes. I never thought I would see trees again, he said, his voice breaking. I never thought my grandchildren would know a world outside the dome. James felt his doubts waver. Whatever the visitors' true purpose, they were giving humanity back its world. How could that be wrong? During the return flight, James found himself talking with Wren again. The security chief seemed more open than usual. Your people adapt quickly, Wren observed. They learn our methods and improve them. Humans are good at learning, James replied. It's how we survived this long. Wren was quiet for a moment. May I ask you something, Commander? Do you trust us now? The question caught James off guard. I want to. But you still have doubts. It wasn't a question. James looked at Wren directly. Would you trust strangers who came to your world with amazing promises? Wren made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, I would not. He leaned closer. Caution is wise, Commander. But sometimes help comes without hidden dangers. When they returned to Dome 7, James found Mark waiting with urgent news. The energy readings from Antarctica have spiked dramatically, Mark said once they were alone, and we've detected new signals being sent from their ships, not to their home world, but toward the edge of our solar system. James felt his earlier doubts return. Do we know what the signals mean? No. But they began right after our long-range sensors detected something unusual at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. What kind of something? Mark showed him the readings. Energy distortions like ripples in space, the kind that might come from very large ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. James thought of Wren's words about their home world, about how they had faced destruction and learned to travel to new places. I think it's time we had a very direct conversation with our visitors, James said. No more vague answers about safeguards. We need to know exactly what they're building in Antarctica, and exactly what those signals mean. Mark nodded in agreement. And if they won't tell us? James looked out the window at the healing earth, at the new trees bending in the wind, at birds flying in a cleaner sky. Then we need to prepare for the possibility that helping us wasn't their only reason for coming here. As night fell, the visitor ships in orbit glowed like new stars in the sky. 6 months ago, their arrival had seemed like humanity's last hope. Now James wondered if they had brought something else with them, a danger they hadn't shared. Tomorrow, he would demand answers. For tonight, he watched the stars and wondered what else might be coming toward Earth from the darkness beyond. James stood in President Laura's office, watching her face as she studied the images Mark had collected. The room was silent except for the soft hum of air filters. You're certain about these readings? She asked finally, looking up at Mark. Yes, Madam President. The energy signatures at the edge of the solar system are growing stronger. And the Antarctic base? Mark pointed to thermal images showing massive power sources beneath the ice. It's far beyond what they described to us. President Laura turned to James. What do you recommend? We confront them directly, James said. No diplomatic games. We need the truth. She nodded slowly. Arrange a meeting with Torin, immediately. 2 hours later, they sat in the main conference room. Torin had arrived promptly when summoned, bringing Ren with him. The two visitors sat calmly across from the humans. We value the partnership we've built, President Laura began, but we've discovered concerning developments that you haven't shared with us. She nodded to Mark, who displayed the images of the Antarctic base and the energy readings from deep space. Your Antarctic facility is much larger than a simple colony, James said, and something is approaching our solar system. Something you're communicating with. Torin and Ren exchanged looks. For the first time since their arrival, the visitors seemed unsure. We had hoped to wait longer before this discussion, Torin said finally, until your world was stronger, until trust was deeper. No more delays, James insisted. Tell us the truth. All of it. Torin stood and walked to the window. Outside, children played in the new park area where real grass now grew. We came to help you, he said. That was not a lie. But we also came because we needed a new home. A refuge. A refuge from what? President Laura asked. Torin turned. From those who destroyed our original world. The room fell silent. Ren spoke up, his voice deeper than usual. Thousands of years ago, our civilization spread across many worlds. We were peaceful, focused on knowledge and growth. Then we encountered the harvesters. Torin activated a device on his wrist. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. A massive ship, black and angular, nothing like the smooth curves of visitor vessels. The harvesters move from system to system, Torin explained. They take what they need, resources, technology, even living beings for study. They leave nothing but empty worlds behind. They destroyed your homeworld? James asked. Not directly, Ren answered. We fought them and drove them back, but the war left our planet devastated. We became nomads, searching for new homes. Torin continued. We discovered Earth 50 years ago. We saw what was happening, how you were destroying your own world through carelessness. We decided to wait, to see if you would correct your path. But you didn't, Ren added. And then we detected harvester scout ships at the edge of your system. They found Earth just as we did. President Laura stood up. Are you saying Earth is in danger from these harvesters? Extreme danger, Torin confirmed. They will arrive in approximately 6 months. James felt cold realization spread through him. The Antarctic base, it's not a colony, it's a defense system. Ren nodded. A planetary shield generator, the most powerful we've ever built. It can protect the entire Earth from their weapons. Why didn't you tell us from the beginning? James demanded. Because of fear, Torin said simply. Not our fear, yours. If we had arrived and said, your world is dying and alien destroyers are coming, would you have believed us? Or would you have seen it as a trick to take your world? Mark spoke up. So you cleaned our atmosphere and restored our ecosystems just to fight these harvesters? No, Ren said firmly. We restored your world because it was the right thing to do, but we also needed a healthy Earth to support the energy requirements of the shield. And he hesitated. We hoped to make this our new home, alongside humanity, after the harvesters are defeated. The humans exchanged looks. The room was silent as they processed this information. Finally, President Laura asked, how dangerous are these harvesters? Can your shield stop them? Torin's face grew grave. They have destroyed hundreds of worlds. The shield will stop their initial attacks, but not forever. To truly defeat them, we will need to fight, your people and ours together. James looked at Ren. That's why you've been teaching us your technology. Not just for restoration, But to prepare us. Ren nodded. Your people learn quickly. Your scientists have already improved some of our designs. Together we have a chance. President Laura called an emergency meeting of the World Council. For hours they debated the visitors' revelations. Some believed it was all a lie to take control of Earth. Others accepted the warning and wanted to prepare. They've done everything they promised, one council member argued. Our world is healing because of them. But they kept this harvester threat secret, another countered. What else aren't they telling us? James listened to the arguments, his mind turning over every interaction with the visitors since their arrival. He thought of Ren's words about their lost home, of the sincere way Torin had spoken with the little girl who asked if they were really fixing Earth. As the debate continued, James slipped out of the meeting. He found Ren standing alone on an observation platform looking at the stars. If these harvesters come, James said, how bad will it be? Ren didn't look away from the sky. Worse than you can imagine. They will strip your world bare. Take samples of your species. Leave the rest to die slowly. You could have left, James said, warned us and moved on. Why stay and help? Ren turned to him then. Because we are tired of running. Tired of watching worlds die. And because... He seemed to search for words. Because your world reminds us of what ours once was. Beautiful, full of life. James stood beside him, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, destruction was approaching. I believe you, James said finally. But many won't. They'll see this as a trick to control Earth. We don't need to control Earth, Ren replied. We need Earth to survive, just as you do. The next morning, the World Council announced its decision. They would continue working with the visitors, but with increased oversight of the Antarctic facility. Military representatives from all dome regions would inspect the shield technology. As James prepared to lead the first inspection team, Mark brought him troubling news. Our long-range scanners just picked up something, Mark said, showing James the readings. A small object crossed the orbit of Neptune, moving fast, too small to be a ship. A probe? James suggested. That's my guess. The harvesters are scouting. Ahead. James thought about what this meant. How long until it reaches Earth? At current speed, about 3 weeks. James looked out at the newly restored landscape around Dome 7. Trees swayed in the clean wind. Birds flew overhead. After decades of death, life was returning to Earth. And now a new threat was coming, one that could end everything. We need to see that shield, James said. And we need to know exactly how it works. Because if the visitors are telling the truth, we have less than 6 months to prepare for the fight of our lives. Mark nodded grimly. And if they're lying? James thought of Ren's face when he spoke of his lost world, of the sincerity he had sensed. Then we'll deal with that too. But first, we need to know what's really waiting for us under the Antarctic. Ice. As dawn broke over the healing Earth, James prepared for the journey to the southern continent. Whatever the truth, he knew one thing with certainty. The peaceful first contact with the visitors had been only the beginning. What came next would determine the fate of both their peoples. The Harvester scout ship arrived sooner than anyone expected. It appeared suddenly in Earth's orbit, a small black vessel that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Before Earth's defense systems could respond, it had scanned the planet and sent a burst transmission toward deep space. James watched from the Antarctic Command Center as visitor ships destroyed the scout, but it was too late. The message had been sent. They know we're here, Torin said grimly. They know about our presence in the shield. The Antarctic base was unlike anything James had imagined. Beneath 2 miles of ice lay a vast complex of visitor technology. At its center stood the shield generator, a tower of pulsing blue energy that reached up through a shaft in the ice. For the past 2 weeks, James and military leaders from all 12 domes had inspected the facility. They had verified that it was indeed a defensive system, Not a weapon aimed at Earth, but a shield to protect it. How long until the main harvester force arrives? James asked. Ren studied the readings from deep space sensors. Based on the Scout's transmission path, less than 3 months, much sooner than we expected. James turned to the human and visitor technicians working side by side. Then we need to speed up our preparations. Over the next weeks, the truth about the harvesters was shared with all of humanity. Some people panicked, others refused to believe, but most understood the danger and joined the preparation efforts. Defense stations were built around each dome. Visitor technology was combined with human designs to create new weapons. Ships that had once been used for environmental restoration were converted for battle. In what had once been called the United Nations building in Dome 1, James addressed the newly formed Earth Defense Council. The shield will protect our planet from their main weapons, he explained. But their smaller ships can get through. We'll need to fight them in space and in the air. President Laura, who now led the council, asked the question everyone feared. Can we win? Torrin stepped forward. The harvesters have never faced a united front before. Always they have found divided worlds, fighting among themselves. Your unity gives us hope. As the preparations continued, James often found himself working alongside Ren. The visitor had become more than an ally. He was a friend. On my world, Ren said one evening as they watched the sunset from the edge of Dome 7, we had skies of deep purple. I still miss it sometimes. Will Earth ever truly be home for your people? James asked. Ren was quiet for a moment. Home is not just a place. It's where you fight to protect what matters. 2 months later, the sensors detected the main harvester fleet entering the solar system. 7 massive ships, each larger than the biggest visitor vessel. They moved with terrible purpose toward Earth. In the Antarctic Command Center, humans and visitors worked together, monitoring the approaching threat. The shield was fully operational now, a thin blue energy field visible from space, surrounding the entire planet. They're sending a transmission, called out a technician. On the main screen appeared a figure that made James step back involuntarily. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways. Limbs too long, skin like polished stone, eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the viewer. We claim this world and its resources, the harvester said in a flat voice. Surrender, and some will be preserved for study. President Laura stood before the camera. This world is not yours to claim. We reject your demands. The harvester seemed unmoved. Resistance has been noted. It changes nothing. The transmission ended. They'll be in attack range in 6 hours, Torrin announced. All defense forces should take position. James headed to the command ship in orbit, a combined human visitor vessel that would coordinate the defense. As his shuttle left Earth's atmosphere, he looked back at the planet. From space, the healing was clearly visible, green spreading. Across continents that had been brown for generations, it was a world worth fighting for. The harvester attack began exactly as Ren had predicted. Their main ship stayed back, firing massive energy weapons that splashed harmlessly against the shield. But smaller vessels poured through, targeting the shield generator and defense stations. All units engage, James ordered. Protect the generator, at all costs. The battle in Earth's orbit was like nothing humans had ever experienced. Visitor ships moved with impossible speed, firing weapons that cut through harvester vessels. Human pilots flying new hybrid fighters showed a courage that surprised even the visitors. From his command post, James watched as the first wave of attackers was driven back. But more were coming. Their main ships are changing position, Ren reported. They're concentrating fire on one section of the shield. On the screens, James could see the shield beginning to flicker where the harvesters focused their attack. They're trying to create an opening, Torrin said. If they succeed, they'll send their harvesting equipment through. James made a quick decision. We need to take the fight to them, target their main ships. Our weapons can't penetrate their hulls, a human officer objected. Not from the outside, James agreed. But if we could get inside. Ren looked at him. You're suggesting a boarding action? It's never been done. Because no one's ever tried, James replied. We have the fast strike ships. We have the combined technology. We have surprise. The plan came together quickly. A small team would use a modified visitor ship to approach the lead harvester vessel. While the main battle distracted the enemy, they would breach the hull and plant explosive devices at critical points. I'll lead the strike team, James said. Ren nodded. And I will go with you. As they prepared for the mission, alarms sounded throughout the command ship. The shield was failing in one sector. Harvester vessels were pushing through. We need to go now, James said, before they establish a foothold. The strike team, 6 humans and 6 visitors, boarded the modified ship. As they launched toward the massive harvester vessel, James watched Earth growing smaller behind them. Somewhere down there, people were looking up at the battle in the sky, hoping for victory. The approach was more difficult than they had expected. Harvester defenses were unlike anything they had trained for. 2 of their escorts were destroyed before they reached the target. Their hull design is strange, the pilot reported. I can't find a normal docking point. Then make one, Ren suggested. They fired concentrated energy beams at one section of the hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dark material began to glow and melt. We're in, the pilot called. The inside of the harvester ship was a nightmare of strange angles and pulsing organic technology. The team moved quickly, placing their explosive devices at what seemed to be power junctions. They know we're here, one of the visitors warned as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. James looked at the timer. 2 minutes until detonation. We need to move. They fought their way back toward their ship, facing strange automated defenses and harvester crew members that moved with robotic precision. 3 of their team fell before they reached the breach point. As they reboarded their vessel and pulled away, James looked back at the massive harvester ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then explosions bloomed inside the dark hull, spreading outward in chains of fire. It's working, someone shouted. The lead harvester ship began to list to one side, its weapons falling silent. The attack on the shield stopped as the other harvester vessels moved to protect their damaged flagship. All forces, attack now, James ordered. Hit them while they're regrouping. The combined human and visitor fleet surged forward. For the first time, the harvesters were on the defensive. Hours later, as the battle continued, James stood on the command deck with Ren and Torin. The remaining harvester ships were retreating, pulling back beyond the orbit of Mars. They're not used to resistance, Torin said, especially not from 2 species fighting together. Will they come back? President Laura asked over the communication link. James stood in President Laura's office, watching her face as she studied the images Mark had collected. The room was silent except for the soft hum of air filters. You're certain about these readings? She asked finally, looking up at Mark. Yes, Madam President. The energy signatures at the edge of the solar system are growing stronger. And the Antarctic base? Mark pointed to thermal images showing massive power sources beneath the ice. It's far beyond what they described to us. President Laura turned to James. What do you recommend? We confront them directly, James said. No diplomatic games. We need the truth. She nodded slowly. Arrange a meeting with Torin, immediately. 2 hours later, they sat in the main conference room. Torin had arrived promptly when summoned, bringing Ren with him. The 2 visitors sat calmly across from the humans. We value the partnership we've built, President Laura began, but we've discovered concerning developments that you haven't shared with us. She nodded to Mark, who displayed the images of the Antarctic base and the energy readings from deep space. Your Antarctic facility is much larger than a simple colony, James said, and something is approaching our solar system. Something you're communicating with. Torin and Ren exchanged looks. For the first time since their arrival, the visitors seemed unsure. We had hoped to wait longer before this discussion, Torin said finally, until your world was stronger, until trust was deeper. No more delays, James insisted. Tell us the truth. All of it. Torin stood and walked to the window. Outside, Children played in the new park area where real grass now grew. "We came to help you," he said. That was not a lie. But we also came because we needed a new home. A refuge. "A refuge from what?" President Laura asked. Torin turned. "From those who destroyed our original world." The room fell silent. Ren spoke up, his voice deeper than usual. "Thousands of years ago, our civilization spread across many worlds. We were peaceful, focused on knowledge and growth. Then we encountered the harvesters." Torin activated a device on his wrist. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. A massive ship, black and angular, nothing like the smooth curves of visitor vessels. "The harvesters move from system to system," Torin explained. "They take what they need, resources, technology, even living beings for study. They leave nothing but empty worlds behind." "They destroyed your homeworld?" James asked. "Not directly," Ren answered. "We fought them and drove them back, but the war left our planet devastated. We became nomads, searching for new homes." Torin continued. "We discovered Earth 50 years ago. We saw what was happening, how you were destroying your own world through carelessness. We decided to wait, to see if you would correct your path." "But you didn't," Ren added. "And then we detected harvester scout ships at the edge of your system. They found Earth just as we did." President Laura stood up. "Are you saying Earth is in danger from these harvesters?" "Extreme danger," Torin confirmed. "They will arrive in approximately 6 months." James felt cold realization spread through him. "The Antarctic base, it's not a colony, it's a defense system." Ren nodded. "A planetary shield generator, the most powerful we've ever built. It can protect the entire Earth from their weapons." "Why didn't you tell us from the beginning?" James demanded. "Because of fear," Torin said simply. "Not our fear, yours. If we had arrived and said, 'Your world is dying and alien destroyers are coming,' would you have believed us? Or would you have seen it as a trick to take your world?" Mark spoke up. "So you cleaned our atmosphere and restored our ecosystems just to fight these harvesters?" "No," Ren said firmly. "We restored your world because it was the right thing to do, but we also needed a healthy Earth to support the energy requirements of the shield. And," he hesitated, "we hoped to make this our new home, alongside humanity. After the harvesters are defeated." The humans exchanged looks. The room was silent as they processed this information. Finally, President Laura asked, "How dangerous are these harvesters? Can your shield stop them?" Torin's face grew grave. "They have destroyed hundreds of worlds. The shield will stop their initial attacks, but not forever. To truly defeat them, we will need to fight, your people and ours together." James looked at Ren. "That's why you've been teaching us your technology. Not just for restoration, but to prepare us." Ren nodded. "Your people learn quickly. Your scientists have already improved some of our designs. Together, we have a chance." President Laura called an emergency meeting of the World Council. For hours, they debated the visitors' revelations. Some believed it was all a lie to take control of Earth. Others accepted the warning and wanted to prepare. "They've done everything they promised," one council member argued. "Our world is healing because of them." "But they kept this harvester threat secret," another countered. "What else aren't they telling us?" James listened to the arguments, his mind turning over every interaction with the visitors since their arrival. He thought of Ren's words about their lost home, of the sincere way Torin had spoken with the little girl who asked if they were really fixing Earth. As the debate continued, James slipped out of the meeting. He found Ren standing alone on an observation platform looking at the stars. "If these harvesters come," James said, "how bad will it be?" Ren didn't look away from the sky. "Worse than you can imagine. They will strip your world bare. Take samples of your species. Leave the rest to die slowly." "You could have left," James said. "Warned us and moved on. Why stay and help?" Ren turned to him then. "Because we are tired of running. tired of watching worlds die. And because, he seemed to search for words, because your world reminds us of what ours once was. Beautiful, full of life. James stood beside him, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, destruction was approaching. I believe you, James said finally. But many won't. They'll see this as a trick to control Earth. We don't need to control Earth, Ren replied. We need Earth to survive, just as you do. The next morning, the World Council announced its decision. They would continue working with the visitors, but with increased oversight of the Antarctic facility. Military representatives from all dome regions would inspect the shield technology. As James prepared to lead the first inspection team, Mark brought him troubling news. Our long-range scanners just picked up something, Mark said, showing James the readings. A small object crossed the orbit of Neptune, moving fast, too small to be a ship. A probe? James suggested. That's my guess. The harvesters are scouting. Ahead. James thought about what this meant. How long until it reaches Earth? At current speed, about 3 weeks. James looked out at the newly restored landscape around Dome 7. Trees swayed in the clean wind. Birds flew overhead. After decades of death, life was returning to Earth. And now a new threat was coming, one that could end everything. We need to see that shield, James said. And we need to know exactly how it works. Because if the visitors are telling the truth, we have less than 6 months to prepare for the fight of our lives. Mark nodded grimly. And if they're lying? James thought of Ren's face when he spoke of his lost world, of the sincerity he had sensed. Then we'll deal with that too. But first, we need to know what's really waiting for us under the Antarctic. Ice. As dawn broke over the healing Earth, James prepared for the journey to the southern continent. Whatever the truth, he knew one thing with certainty. The peaceful first contact with the visitors had been only the beginning. What came next would determine the fate of both their peoples.